Another pause, then a small chuckle. "You're not as easy to intimidate as most." Elon smirked. "You'd be surprised what I don't fear." The voice exhaled. "Fine. Check your inbox in 1 hour. But understand this. Once you step into this world, there's no stepping back." The call disconnected. Elon and Thomas sat in silence, the tension heavy between them. For the first time in years, Thomas looked less like a man who had lost everything and more like a man who had just found a reason to fight again. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. "They wouldn't give us anything unless they had a reason," Thomas murmured. Elon nodded. "Which means we're either closer than we think, or walking into a trap." The Tesla hummed as they drove toward a quiet, secured location, one of Elon's lesser-known facilities where prying eyes wouldn't follow. An hour passed like a slow-moving storm. Then Thomas's phone buzzed again. This time, a video link. Thomas hesitated, his breath shallow. "If this is real..." Elon put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then we bring him home." With one deep breath, Thomas tapped the link. The screen flickered, then loaded. A dimly lit room. A young man, maybe in his 20s, sat in a chair, looking straight at the camera. His face was thinner than Thomas had remembered, but the eyes, the same piercing blue, were unmistakable. "Dad," the young man whispered. Thomas's breath hitched. He reached out instinctively, as if trying to touch the screen. "Ethan." Before more could be said, the video cut to black. A single message appeared. **** cone last move. We decide how this ends. ****. Elon exhaled sharply. They're trying to control the game. Thomas clenched his fists. "Then let's rewrite the rules." Outside, the city lights flickered as the night stretched on. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: this wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in years, Thomas had hope. And with Elon by his side, he wasn't going to stop until he got his son back. And then it started moving straight toward them. Elon barely had time to think. The SUV rolled forward, tires screeching against the pavement, headlights blinding in the dark. Instinct kicked in. He grabbed Thomas by the arm and yanked him back just as the vehicle rushed past, missing them by inches. The force of the air sent a shock through his chest, but they were still standing. The SUV didn't stop. It sped down the street, then skidded into a sharp turn, vanishing into the night. But Elon knew this wasn't over. Whoever was inside wanted to send a message. A warning. Thomas was breathing hard, gripping the side of the car for balance. "They're not playing around," he muttered. Elon's mind raced. He had seen threats before, competitors trying to crush him, governments pushing back against his ideas. But this was different. This wasn't about business. This was about something buried so deep, someone was willing to kill to keep it hidden. "We need to go now," Elon said, opening the car door. Thomas hesitated. "They won't stop. The moment you get involved, you're on their list." Elon gave a half smile. "I think I've been on a lot of lists for a long time." Thomas let out a short, breathless chuckle, then climbed in. As soon as the doors shut, Elon hit the accelerator, weaving through the empty streets. He wasn't heading home. He needed somewhere safer, somewhere they could talk without eyes on them. As they sped through the city, Thomas kept glancing at the side mirror. They'll be back. Elon tightened his grip on the wheel. Good. That means we're getting close to something. Thomas shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me anymore. They know you were listening. That changes everything." Elon didn't answer right away. He had spent his whole life challenging the impossible. But this wasn't about technology or innovation. This was about truth, about power that operated in the shadows. And now, they weren't just after Thomas. They were coming for him too. Suddenly, Thomas's phone buzzed. He frowned, pulling it from his coat. The screen was cracked, the battery barely holding on. But when he read the message, his face went pale. Elon glanced over. "What is it?" Thomas swallowed, his hands shaking as he turned the screen toward Elon. The message was short, direct. ****, should have stayed quiet. Now it's too late. ****. Elon stared at the message, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. The weight of it settled in the air between them, threatening, final. Thomas's face was tense, his fingers gripping the phone like it might vanish from his hands. "They know exactly where we are," Thomas muttered. His voice was steady, but Elon could hear the edge of fear creeping in. "We need to disappear. Now." Elon nodded, making a sharp turn down a side street, cutting through a maze of alleyways. His mind was racing, calculating. This wasn't just about finding safety anymore. Whoever these people were, they had been watching, waiting. They wanted control, and right now, Thomas was their loose end. But now Elon was involved, and he didn't take kindly to being threatened. As he drove, a thought struck him. "Wait, how did they get your number?" Thomas looked down at his phone, then back at Elon, realization dawning on his face. "I haven't used this number in years. It was disconnected. No one should be able to contact me." Elon's pulse quickened. If they were reaching out now, it meant they weren't just watching. They were inside the system, pulling strings in real time. Before he could respond, his own phone lit up. A call. No number. No ID. Without thinking, he put it on speaker. "Who is this?" A smooth, measured voice filled the car. "Mr. Musk, you should know when to walk away." Elon felt his jaw tighten. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." A pause. Then the voice chuckled. "You're playing a game you don't understand. This isn't about a missing son. It's about control, and you're stepping on the wrong toes." Thomas leaned closer. "Where is my son?" he demanded. The voice hesitated, and then something neither of them expected. "He's alive." Elon and Thomas exchanged a sharp glance. For years, Thomas had lived with the possibility that his son was gone. Now, with two simple words, everything shifted. "But you'll never find him," the voice continued. "Unless, of course, you're willing to make a deal." Elon's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had spent his life dismantling power structures, defying odds. But this was personal. He looked at Thomas, seeing the desperation in his eyes. And then Elon did what no one expected. He smiled. "All right, let's talk." The line went silent for a moment, then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "I knew you'd be reasonable, Mr. Musk." Elon studied Thomas, his mind turning over the possibilities. This wasn't just some random encounter. It felt like fate had put them on the same path tonight. He had always believed in pushing limits, breaking through barriers, whether in technology, space, or even life itself. But this was different. This was about a man's past, his pain, and the truth he had been chasing for years. "How do you know they were behind it?" Elon asked, his voice steady but curious. Thomas exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Because I saw the signs. The way my investigations were shut down. The way my friends in the force stopped returning my calls. They erased my son like he never existed." His fingers tightened around the badge, his knuckles turning white. "And they made sure I paid the price for trying to fight back." Elon thought for a moment. He wasn't a stranger to powerful people trying to control narratives. He had faced his share of opposition, people who wanted to see him fail, companies and institutions that feared change. But this was something else. "Have you tried to find your son?" he asked. Thomas let out a bitter chuckle. "For years. I had contacts, people I trusted. But one by one, they either backed off or disappeared. Eventually, I had nothing left." He gestured to the streets around him. "This is where the truth led me." Elon's gaze flickered toward the city's skyline, the towering buildings that represented wealth, power, and influence. If what Thomas was saying was true, then somewhere out there, someone had rewritten his life, stolen everything from him, and buried the truth so deep that no one dared to dig it up. "Who was the man you put away?" Elon asked. Thomas hesitated, his jaw tightening. A businessman. Not just any businessman, one with ties to people who shake the world from the shadows. I thought I was doing the right thing by taking him down, but it turns out some men are too powerful to fall. Elon felt a familiar fire ignite inside him. He had spent his life challenging those who said things were impossible, who believed power was unshakable. If Thomas was right, if there was even a chance that the truth had been buried, then maybe, just maybe, it could still be uncovered. Before Elon could respond, Thomas suddenly tensed. His eyes flickered past Elon's shoulder. "We're being watched," he whispered. Elon didn't turn around right away. He had learned over the years that the moment you acknowledge being watched, you give away your awareness. Instead, he kept his eyes on Thomas, his voice low and controlled. "Are you sure?" Thomas gave a small nod, his fingers gripping the edge of his coat. "I know when someone's tailing me. Been happening for years. But this is different." His voice tightened. "They know I'm talking to you." A slow chill crept up Elon's spine. He wasn't a stranger to scrutiny. Cameras followed him everywhere. Every word he spoke was analyzed, every move dissected. But this wasn't journalists or online critics. This was something unseen, something lurking just beyond the edges of the conversation. "Where?" Elon asked. Thomas flicked his eyes toward the far side of the street. Black SUV, tinted windows. "Parked too long for just a passing driver." He exhaled. "They've been here since you stopped." Elon's mind raced. This was bigger than he'd thought. Someone didn't just want Thomas silenced. They wanted to make sure no one listened to him in the first place. He glanced at Thomas, measuring the fear in his expression. "What do they usually do?" Thomas swallowed hard. "Depends. If they think I know too much, they make life difficult. If they think I'm getting close," his voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Elon straightened. "Come with me." Thomas hesitated. "To where?" "Somewhere safe," Elon said. "If someone doesn't want you talking, then that means you have something worth hearing." For the first time that night, Thomas looked unsure. "Elon, you don't understand. These people, they don't just make problems go away. They erase them." Elon met his gaze, unwavering. "I've built my life proving people wrong. Let's see if they can erase me too." Thomas exhaled, then gave a small nod. "All right, but if we do this, we do it my way." Elon nodded. "Then let's move. Now." They turned toward the Tesla, moving quickly but not rushing. Too much urgency would confirm their suspicion. As they reached the car, Elon unlocked it with a subtle flick of his hand. Just as Thomas was about to step in, a loud screech filled the air. The black SUV's headlights flashed on, and then it started moving straight toward them. Elon Musk stepped out of his sleek, black Tesla onto the dimly lit streets of downtown Los Angeles. The city was alive with the usual late-night buzz. Cars rushing past, neon signs flickering, distant sirens wailing. But amidst all that, something caught his eye. Sitting on the cold pavement, wrapped in a tattered old coat, was an elderly man with a weathered face, a long grey beard, and eyes that carried the weight of a lifetime. For a moment, Elon hesitated. He had walked these streets before, seen countless people struggling, but something about this man made him stop. Maybe it was the way he sat, upright, as if holding onto a sense of dignity despite his circumstances. Or maybe it was the small, rusted sheriff's badge clutched tightly in his hands. Whatever it was, Elon felt a pull, an urge to know his story. "Hey, sir," Elon said, kneeling beside the man. "Are you okay?" The man slowly lifted his head, his piercing blue eyes meeting Elon's with a mixture of exhaustion and surprise. He studied him for a long moment before giving a tired smile. "Never thought I'd see the day Elon Musk would stop to chat with a nobody like me." Elon chuckled. "Nobody? That badge tells me otherwise." The old man sighed, rubbing the warm metal between his fingers. "Used to be somebody. Served this city for 30 years as a sheriff. Protected people, put away criminals, did everything I thought was right. And yet, here I am. His voice carried both pride and pain. Elon frowned. What happened? The man exhaled, his breath visible in the chilly night air. Life has a funny way of humbling you, son. One bad turn, and everything you built crumbles. Elon could see it now, the untold story behind those tired eyes. A man who had given everything to serve and protect, only to be left with nothing. But why? What had happened to him? And more importantly, could he be helped? Before Elon could ask more, the man suddenly looked away, as if remembering something painful. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his badge tighter. And then he said something that made Elon's breath catch. "There's something I never told anyone, and I think it's time." Elon leaned in, his curiosity piqued. Whatever this man had to say, he knew it was going to change everything. Elon stayed silent, waiting for the man to continue. The night air felt heavier now, the city sounds fading into the background. The old sheriff glanced down at his badge again, running his fingers over it like a memory he wasn't sure he wanted to relive. His hands were rough, scarred, hands that had once held a gun, a gavel, maybe even a life or two. "My name's Thomas," he finally said. "Thomas Reed. I wasn't always like this." He gestured at his torn clothes and worn-out boots. "I had a home, a family, a job I gave everything to." He paused. Maybe too much. Elon nodded, encouraging him to go on. Thomas exhaled slowly. 30 years in law enforcement, and you see things most people wouldn't believe. Some of them haunt you. Some of them you wish you could forget. He rubbed his temple, as if the memories physically hurt. One case. That's all it took to turn my whole life upside down. Elon leaned in slightly. What happened? Thomas looked up, meeting Elon's eyes with a stare so intense it sent a chill down his spine. "I put away a man who wasn't supposed to be found." A heavy silence fell between them. Thomas swallowed hard before continuing. He was powerful, connected, not the kind of man a small-town sheriff should go after. "But I did." His lips tightened. "At first, I thought I'd done the right thing. Justice, right? But then things started happening. My wife, she started getting threats. My son," his voice cracked for the first time. "He disappeared." Elon's heart clenched. They took him. Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "No, they made it look like he left. Like he wanted nothing to do with me. Notes, phone calls, everything pointed to him cutting ties. But a father knows." He clenched his fist. "I know my son wouldn't just leave." Elon felt the weight of the moment. The pain in Thomas's voice was real, raw. He had spent years building rockets, dreaming of the future, pushing humanity forward. But this was a different kind of battle. "They ruined me," Thomas continued. "Made sure I lost my job, my pension, my home. And by the time I figured out how deep it went, it was too late. I became a ghost in my own city." Elon's mind raced. He had expected to hear a tragic story, maybe offer some help, but this was something else. And then Thomas looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're the only person who might be able to help me find the truth."